Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet Nashtaprayasha Bhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtikir. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 11, chapter entitled, Lord Ramachandra Rules the World. So we're reading from text 2 all the way to 5, and 5's on the board. So I'll just quickly read 2 to 4. Hotre dadadishcham prachim Brahmane dakshinam prabhu abharyave pratichimva uttaram samagayasa. Translation. Lord Ramachandra gave the entire east to the Hota priest, the entire south to the Brahma priest, the west to the Advaryu priest, and the north to the Udgata priest, the reciter of the Samaveda. In this way he donated his kingdom. Text 3. Acharyaya dadoshesham yavati bhustadantara manyamana idam kritsnam brahmano rahati nispriha. Therefore, thinking that because the Brahmanas have no material desires, they should possess the entire world, Lord Ramachandra delivered the land between the east, west, north and south to the Acharya. Text 4. Iti ayam tadalankara vasobhyam avasheshita tatarajanya vaidehi saumangal yavasheshita. After thus giving in charity to the Brahmanas, Lord Ramachandra retained only his personal garments and ornaments, and similarly the queen Mother Sita was left with only her nose ring and nothing else. Text 5. And this is the one we're chanting, so please repeat. Te tu brahmana devasya vatsalyam vikshya samstutam prita klina dhyastasmai pratyarpyedam bhabhashire. Okay, please repeat. Te, the Hota, Brahma, and other priests. To, but, Brahmana Devasya, of Lord Ramachandra, who loved the Brahmanas so much. Vatsalyam, the paternal affection. Viksha, after seeing. Samstutam, worshipped with prayers. Pritaha, being very pleased. Klinadhiyaha, with melted hearts. Tasmai, unto him. Lord Ramachandra. Pratyarpya, returning. Idam, this, all the land given to them. Babhashire, spoke. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. All the Brahmanas who were engaged in the various activities of the sacrifice were very pleased with Lord Ramachandra, who was greatly affectionate and favorable to the Brahmanas. Thus, with melted hearts, they returned all the property received from him and spoke as follows. Purport. In the previous chapter, it was said that the prajas, the citizens strictly followed the system of Varnashram Dharma. The Brahmanas acted exactly like Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas exactly like Kshatriyas, and so on. Therefore, when Lord Ramachandra gave everything in charity to the Brahmanas, the Brahmanas being qualified, wisely considered that Brahmanas are not meant to possess property to make a profit from it. The qualifications of a Brahmana are given in the Bhagavad-Gita 18:42. Shamo damas tapashaucham shantirarjavameva cha yanam vijnanamastikyam brahma karma swabhavajam. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. These are the qualities by which the Brahmanas work. The Brahminical character offers no scope for possessing land and ruling citizens. These are the duties of a Kshatriya. Therefore, although the Brahmanas did not refuse Lord Ramachandra's gift, after accepting it, they returned it to the king. The Brahmanas were so pleased with Lord Ramachandra's affection towards them that their hearts melted. They saw that Lord Ramachandra, aside from being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was fully qualified as a Kshatriya and was exemplary in character. One of the qualifications of a Kshatriya is to be charitable. A Kshatriya or ruler levies taxes upon the citizens not for his personal sense gratification, but to give charity in suitable cases. Dhanam Ishvara Bhava. On one hand, Kshatriyas have the propensity to rule, but on the other, they are very liberal with charity. When Maharaj Yudhishthira gave charity, he engaged Karna to take charge of distributing it. Karna was famous as Data Karna. The word Data refers to one who gives charity very liberally. The kings always kept a large quantity of food grains in stock, and whenever there was any scarcity of grains, they would distribute grains in charity. A Kshatriya's duty is to give charity, and a Brahmana's duty is to accept charity, but not more than needed to maintain body and soul together. Therefore, when the Brahmanas were given so much land by Lord Ramachandra, they returned it to him and were not greedy. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you all for coming. It's very cold and it's very inspiring to see devotees to come in here, Bhagavatam, rain, sun or shine. Firstly, I'd like to pray to the deities and all the devotees here that I can speak something. I found it kind of difficult to, squeeze something out of this purport. It's mostly about Varnashram and about Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. So I thought I'd just read a little bit from the 7th canto, just after Prahlad Maharaj's pastimes, where the 4 classes are described. So we know the qualities of a Brahmana and a Kshatriya and their activities. It's nice to hear from Srila Prabhupada. This is from the 11th chapter of the 7th canto. It's titled The 4 Social Orders. It's interesting, actually. Prabhupada begins, Bhagavatam itself talks about how the beginning of the social orders in Varnashram, they start with the Garbhadan Samskar. And if there's no Garbhadan Samskar, then there's no real Varnashram. It starts, from the very beginning. And Bhagavatam actually describes that first has to be Garbhadan Samskars, and then then they can be considered human beings. Otherwise, they're considered animals, according to Bhagavatam. And after they're considered human beings, there's certain activities that they have to perform to be considered as human beings, and there's many of them. I can just read a few. It's really long, but just so you get an idea that this is a text 8 to 12. It's very long. I won't read the whole thing, but just so you get some kind of clue. These are the general principles to be followed by all human beings: truthfulness, mercy, austerity, observing fasts on certain days of the month, bathing twice a day, tolerance, discrimination between right and wrong, control of the mind, control of the senses, non-violence, celibacy, charity, reading of scriptures, simplicity, satisfaction, rendering service to saintly people, gradually taking leave of unnecessary engagements, observing the futility of the unnecessary activities of human society, remaining silent and grave, and avoiding unnecessary talk, considering whether one is the body or the soul, distributing food equally to living entities, both men and animals, seeing every soul, especially in the human form, as part of the Supreme Lord, hearing about the activities and instructions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, chanting about these activities and instructions, always remembering these activities and instructions, trying to render service, performing worship, offering obeisances, becoming a servant, becoming a friend, and surrendering one's whole self. These 30 qualifications must be acquired in the human form of life. So this is the preliminary, requisites for being a human being. And then the next verse describes what a Brahmana is. We obviously read from Bhagavad-Gita right here, where it's described that peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness, they're the qualities of the Brahmanas. But then there's 6 activities of Brahmanas: Patana, Yajana, Dana, and I think Pratigraha. So worshipping the deity, teaching others to worship the deity, studying Shastra, teaching others to study the Shastra, giving in charity, and accepting charity. And Prabhupada says in the purport that out of these 6, 3 are most important. And those 3 are worshipping the deity, studying the Shastra, and giving charity. And then Prabhupada explains in that by doing so, one can maintain his life as a Brahmana, because a Brahmana is supposed to teach these things. And when he teaches these things, naturally, as a reciprocation, people give him gifts and people give him donations, and that's how he sustains himself. And Prabhupada goes on to explain in the purport that a Brahmana can never work under anyone else, because as soon as he works under somebody else, then he's lost his qualification as a Brahmana immediately. Prabhupada's description of a Brahmana is an independent and thoughtful person, someone who can think for himself. And it's kind of very important. If you read purports of Srila Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam, you'll find he mentions Varnashram so much. He mentions Brahmanas the most, out of all the classes. And he's kind of pressing this point again and again, that we need Brahmanas, because Brahmanas are recognized as the head of society. And right now we have a society with no head. So it's kind of just a flapping corpse. You're just running around like crazy. You can cut off the head of a chicken, it's still running around for a while, but it has not much purpose. It's only a matter of time before it drops dead. And so we're kind of in a very precarious situation in society because there's no Brahmanas. In reality, we don't really care so much about Varnashram, because the highest thing is pure devotional service. Even Lord Chaitanya, he says, I'm not a sannyasi, I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm none of these things. I'm Gopi Bhartu, Pada Kamalayo, Dasa Dasanudas. I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Shamsundar. But at the same time, if you see his life, he very strictly followed the codes and conducts of being a sannyasi. He wouldn't even allow women to come very close. They had to pay obeisances from a big distance. So although he said this, you can see from his life and his teachings, he followed Varnashram. Because what he followed is called Daivi Varnashram. And Daivi Varnashram is very essential, actually. It's very important in Krishna consciousness. There's a lecture of Srila Prabhupada on the 9th of May in Mayapur. I forget which year, but you can search it up, 9th of May. And that he describes Varnashram so nicely. And he even says how, there are anarchists, and there are monarchs, and there are socialists, and there are capitalists. And these four ideologies, they seem to contradict each other. But in Daivi Varnashram, they actually work together. They work together in equilibrium, although they seem so different in their ideas. Because you see, the Brahmanas, they're anarchists. They're not part of any administration, actually. They live separately. They live on their own strength, and their activities are only 3 in primary. There are 6, but they're 3. They worship the deity, they study Shastra, and what's the last one? They give in charity. They don't have anything else to do. You can see over here, Lord Ramachandra gave them land. But if they have land, it's got nothing to do with worshipping deities, it's got nothing to do with studying Shastra, and maybe it's got something to do with giving donation. So they gave it back to Lord Ramachandra. And that's the activities of the Brahmanas. The Kshatriyas, they're the ones who administrate. They take all the land and the praja, the citizens, and they look after them. They take care of them. They make sure everything's maintained nicely. So the Brahmanas are the anarchs, but the Kshatriyas, they're the monarchs. They make sure everything's running nicely under the king. And then you have the Vaishyas, who are like the capitalists. They make profit by trading. They make money by selling things and make sure the body is moving, the belly of the body, and they make sure the energy is running nicely. And finally, you have the Shudras, who you could say are like socialists. They're like communists. Actually, Prabhupada explains this. And they get just as much as they need, and they work very equally, and they work under the other 3 varnas. So you find in Daivi Varnashram, it only works if the center is the absolute truth. If the center of the whole thing is focused on giving pleasure to Krishna. Otherwise it fails, because these ideologies are completely different. So Daivi Varnashram works, and Prabhupada in this lecture, he describes so nicely how it is simply there to create peacefulness in society. Because if you have a peaceful situation in society, then you can happily sit down and chant Hare Krishna. And that's the whole point. So that we can happily sit down in a comfortable situation where we're not disturbed and chant Hare Krishna. And that's the whole point of Varnashram, Daivi Varnashram, at least, in Kali Yuga. And okay, maybe Daivi Varnashram might not be put in place in the whole world, and it's complete chaos, especially if you go to some places. Like I was spending some time in New York, and if you live there, it's really crazy. It's a crazy world, You see all kinds of crazy people running around, doing so many crazy things, and nothing makes sense at all. It's really bewildering, and unless you have devotees around you, you just completely get lost. It's a crazy world. But at least we can have a nice, peaceful society within our Krishna consciousness. And that's Prabhupada's vision. He wanted farms, he wanted temples, he wanted, the whole system to be put in place. But also we must understand why that system has to be put in place. It's put in place so that we can sit down peacefully and chant Hare Krishna. And Brahmanas, that's what Prabhupada is focusing on. You can see in so many lectures and so many of his purports, he's saying the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement, and it's one of the 7 purposes, is to establish Brahmanas. There's no Brahmanas. There's a lack of Brahmanas in the whole world. And because of that, there's no direction. The Kshatriyas are administrating, but they take guidance from the Brahmanas. And we have so many examples in Bhagavatam. Janak Maharaj and Yudhishthir Maharaj right now, and so many. All of them have a Brahmana advisory council that they take shelter of. And these Brahmanas, you see, they live in society, but they're completely aloof from it. They don't have anything to do with it. They're not under any king, they're not under any control of anyone. They're given full independence. But it doesn't mean that they can do whatever they like and they can just run around and, do whatever they like. There are codes and conducts of the Brahminical culture that they have to follow. And they followed that. And by following that, which is studying Shastra, worshipping the deity, and giving donation, and teaching others to do these things, and also accepting donations, when they do these things, they get strength. They get all these qualities of peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. And by the purity that they gain, they're able to guide the Kshatriyas. And by being able to guide the Kshatriyas in that way, the Kshatriyas are ruling very nicely. And then you have a peaceful situation. So it's actually essential. It's the head. Without the head, it won't work. I wanted to read, there's a really nice verse in the last verse of chapter 14 of the same canto, 7th canto. It's really nice. It just shows Krishna's, what the Krishna thinks of Brahmanas. This is text 42. Okay. My dear King Yudhishthir, the Brahmanas, especially those engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord, throughout the entire world are recognized and worshipped by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the heart and soul of all creation. The Brahmanas, by their preaching, sanctify the three worlds with the dust of their lotus feet, and thus they are worshipable even for Krishna. I'll read the purport as well. As admitted by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad-Gita 1869, Nya cha tasman manyeshu kaschin me priyakritama. The Brahmanas preach the cult of Krishna consciousness all over the three worlds, and therefore, although they worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord also recognizes them as worshipable. The relationship is reciprocal. The Brahmanas want to worship Krishna, and similarly, Krishna wants to worship the Brahmanas. In conclusion, therefore, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas who are engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord must be worshipped by religionists, philosophers, and people in general. At the Rajasuya Yagya of Maharaj Yudhishthir, many hundreds and thousands of Brahmanas were present, yet Krishna was selected to be worshipped first. Therefore, Krishna is always the Supreme Person, but by his causeless mercy, he recognizes the Brahmanas as dearmost to him. This is a really nice verse. This is such a nice purport as well. And in the translation, in the verse, like if you look for the word to word, there's nothing really about preaching. And it's Prabhupada's little addition, in the translation he says, my dear King Yudhishthir, the Brahmanas, especially those engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord throughout the entire world. And that's not really there in the Sanskrit, but Prabhupada is translated in such a unique way where he's kind of added some commentary within the translations as well. Some people don't like it, but he's like expressing his heart. It's very sweet, actually. You can see this is the mood of our Acharya. Yesterday, Lokanath Maharaj gave such a nice class, how he said we're all Acharya Vans. And he said we have so many Acharyas with us, and our primary Acharya is our Srila Prabhupada. And it's nice, we read these books and we understand, Prabhupada's heart. And here, Prabhupada is saying, the Brahmanas, especially those engaged in preaching the glories of the Lord. And then in the purport, he kind of justifies himself by quoting Bhagavad-Gita 1869, and he says, Nacha tasman manushyeshu kaschin me priyakritama. The Brahmanas preach the cult of Krishna consciousness all over the world. Even if you look at this purport that we're on today, it's really amazing. Something that struck me when I was reading is this word in Sanskrit called klina diyas. And the word for word is with melted hearts. Prabhupada explains in the purport that Lord Ramachandra, aside from being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where am I? Okay, therefore, although the Brahmanas did not refuse Lord Ramachandra's gift, after accepting it, they returned it to the king. The Brahmanas were so pleased with Lord Ramachandra's affection towards them that their hearts melted. This is how much love Krishna has for the Brahmanas. Where Prabhupada is explaining how it's reciprocal, that he melts their hearts. Krishna is very expert at melting hearts, and that's because the Brahmanas, and Prabhupada explains in this verse, they're preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. When you glorify anyone, any ordinary person, and if they overhear you glorifying them, it's kind of very nice. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but if someone's glorifying you and they don't realize that you're there and you're kind of just somewhere and you hear them glorifying you, it's really pleasing, to the false ego and to the heart. So in the same way, Krishna is also very pleased when you glorify him. And it's reciprocal. So the Brahmana's hearts are melting, but Krishna's heart is also melting, And as a result, he can't help but want to worship Brahmanas. But it's not just any old, Brahmanas. We're reading about Ramchandra. We just finished how Ravana, kidnapped Sita and he tried to enjoy her and Lord Ram had to finish him off. He was a Brahmana also. Ravana was a Brahmana and an expert one also. But he wasn't preaching the cult of Krishna consciousness. He wasn't preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. And this is why Prabhupada mentions it, because we have to understand what it means by Brahmana. It doesn't just mean any old Brahmana. There are so many Brahmanas. There are smarta Brahmanas. There are Brahmanas that, if you read these purports of the 7th canto, Prabhupada talks about how in an emergency situation, a Brahmana may take up the role of a Kshatriya or lower, or a Vaishya, or even a Shudra, in an emergency situation. Never a Shudra. But in an emergency situation, this may happen, but it's not recommended. And then Prabhupada in the purport, he explains how right now the whole world is in an emergency situation because there is no Krishna consciousness. Therefore, some of the Brahmanas have problem, the smarta Brahmanas he's speaking about, they have trouble with us because we are initiating the Europeans who are considered to be Mlechas and Yavanas into the Brahminical order, and they're considering this as they're criticizing us. But then Prabhupada says this is an emergency situation, so we have to do this. We have to create Brahmanas out of nothing, practically. So it's a really nice purport. Actually, you can see Prabhupada is like in this mood of urgency. And in those purports he says that Brahmanas may sometimes be given land and sometimes be given cow, and they can take up the activities of a Vaishya, but it should only be to maintain their body. So over here, these Brahmanas were given so much land by Ramchandra, but it was too much land and they didn't really need that much, so they just gave it back to him. And in this way, they had such a nice reciprocal relationship. Ultimately, that's the point. That's the point of Varnashram. You're supposed to establish your relationship with Krishna. That's why we're doing all of these things. That's the center. By preaching Krishna consciousness, you automatically think of Krishna, and you have to sprain your brain to figure out how I can speak about Krishna to make him look nice. And when you do that, Krishna appreciates it, and your relationship with him gets established. That's why we're studying Shastra. That's why we've come here in the cold. My hands are freezing and everyone's probably very cold, but we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. It's to make Krishna happy. And when Krishna becomes happy, then our hearts will get melted. And when our hearts get melted, then our relationship with him can be established. Unfortunately, our hearts are very hard. At least I can speak for myself, I guess. And that's why Lord Chaitanya, his teachings begin with Cheto Darpanamarjanam, Bhava Mahadava Agni Nirvapanam. It's become hard in the fire of the material misery, enjoyment, whatever you want to call it. And because of that, it's become so hard, it's practically cracking, and there's no question of it melting. So we need to cultivate these qualities of a Brahmana, because from going from Brahmana to Vaishnava is much easier than from going to some low-class nonsense to Vaishnava. Because when you're a Brahmana, you cultivate these qualities: peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, and honesty, and wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. And these things, they help. They help with making the heart soft. They can also help with making the heart hard. In Ravana's case, if you get puffed up that you're a Brahmana. But if you keep Krishna in the center by preaching about him, wherever you go, Jari Dekho, Tariko, Krishna Upadesh, we preach about him, then naturally Krishna will be affectionate. And this reciprocal dealing that we have will manifest more and more. And that's the point. That's why we have varnashram. That's why we need to be brahmanas. And the world is in a emergency situation. Yeah. We have like 20 minutes left. I can think of more things to say, but I'd like to open it up a little bit, maybe allow someone to comment or ask some questions or try to answer to the best of my ability. If someone would like to add to the... Yes, Prabhu.
You spoke of the emergency.
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada labored for some decades to establish Krishna consciousness here in India. But it was actually only when he brought Westerners back. So we could say that the receptivity was there in the Westerners. We know we pray to Lord Chaitanya, Patita Pavana, Hekutava, Atara Motion, Patita Prabhupada. So our qualification actually is our actually fallen state. But if in that fallen state we're suffering enough to be receptive, like Srila Prabhupada was trying in India, but everyone thought, how do we know this stuff? It actually shows how significant Srila Bhakti-yoga Saraswati Thakur's accomplishment to establish 60 temples in such a short period of time. And I read the other day, he said it 60,000.
Wow.
Extraordinary. But yeah, now that ISKCON is established all over the world, it's become very prestigious everywhere. That receptivity seems to be the thing. If you have that receptivity, all of those conditions can be overcome. So that's our qualification, somehow being receptive to Srila Prabhupada's message.
Jai. Mataji has something.
Hare Krishna Guru.
Hare
I was
Krishna.
listening to the class online at home and I was so delighted to see you speak because this is very refreshing actually for the younger generation also to see, young devotees give really deep, meaningful classes. So thank you so much. And you gave a very nice class actually. It was very deep and very thoughtful and very Krishna conscious. So you just don't do wonderful treatment, you speak from the heart too. Okay, so now I want to ask you a question. In the purport, I hope this won't be a controversial question, but I'm going to ask. But yet, reading the purport and listening to your class kind of, stirred me a little bit inside. So it says that, let me just find that part, where it talks about charity. A Kshatriya ruler levies taxes upon the citizens not for his personal sense gratification, but to give charity in suitable cases. So forgive me, but I wish to just bring this point that I've observed in 25 years of Krishna consciousness, where within ISKCON, we're a growing society, I understand that, where we find that within temples, within ISKCON temples, devotees who are in position of being the, so to speak, ruler or the guy or the one who's heading, they do collect donations, etc. But they're not used in, they do get used for personal sense gratification. And it's not just me, devotees know this and they see this, and it's not an uncommon thing that I'm talking about. Maybe others would like to comment on this. So when that does happen, when donations are collected from people that you are preaching to who are innocent, they don't understand the situation inside, if you like. But then that money is engaged in personal sense gratification and not used in the purpose that it was collected for. For me, I don't feel very happy with that. I don't know how others will observe that, how they feel. So would you kindly throw some light on this for me, please?
Well, like Prabhupada says, without a head, it's not going to work. And even though we may have managers or leaders or whoever they may be, they're supposed to have someone above them. In Daivi Varnashram, the ultimate authority are thoughtful, independent brahmanas that have no administration over them. That's how Daivi Varnashram works. And if you have a leader that doesn't have a brahmana to counsel them or advise them, it'll be very difficult for that Kshatriya natured devotee to remain level-headed, because a Kshatriya is very passionate by nature, and you need that passion to make things work. But you also need the mode of goodness to make sure the passion is directed in the right place. So if you don't have brahmanas, you're going to have chaos. Although it's funny, they're anarchists and they create the opposite of chaos, But that's the main principle. The problem is rooting there, is that there are not enough brahmanas who are given enough space and enough of a peaceful environment, and they're not supposed to be involved in managing, or they're not supposed to be, brahmanas are supposed to be just kept a bit aloof, so they can have a clear thinking space and a very Krishna conscious kind of mindset. So when someone who is completely involved in managing, and when you're involved in managing, they're influenced by so many different circumstances. You can't blame them in one sense, they're doing so many things. So the brahmana who's outside of it, he can see it in a much more sober way, and by seeing that, he can guide the Kshatriya, like devotee, in the proper direction, So you could say, to solve the problem, a few good men, or more than a few good men, should become real brahmanas and take care of the society,
Yeah, that's really nice from what you said. When you were saying that reminded me of how because this chapter is about Lord Ram, in his Raja, he's the king, but yet he had the rishis and the munis and the brahmanas who would guide him, who were his gurus. Here this temple is really refreshing because it's just so wonderful in every way. I'm not talking about this temple, and I won't say which. That's irrelevant. It's immaterial, but sometimes we see it in our society when the Brahmins of our society, the sannyasis, when they see things happening in the wrong way and they try to correct, they are kind of, pushed aside. So what goes on carries on going on.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Prabhupada is watching how he's feeling. Maybe everybody can think how would Prabhupada feel about what we are doing, because he wouldn't even spend a paisa without thinking twice. So, that gives us a lot of food for thought and introspection in what we're doing. And I would beg that I would always check myself in whatever I do. I am doing what I'm saying this, but at the same time I kind of needed to express this because this purport I know class broke that out for me, so I hope I didn't offend anybody. But if anybody would like to throw some more light, I'll be very grateful.
I think Prabhu wants to.
For your points.
Oh. Okay.
I have a question as an aspiring anarchist.
Jai.
Sometimes we talk about ashram, it's like there's a king and there's 5 brahmins and we're done with it. But I think Prabhupada also, spoke quite a bit about rabbinical culture. And that really was on every level. Every village had brahmins, there was this sort of rabbinical culture we talk about Varnashram and Vedic culture, this rabbinical culture that really set a tone and an energy that influenced culture at every level. And the culture is, like in modern society, the think tanks and advisors that, someone's administrator, they go to advice that's actually practical. And the Brahmins is this vibrant rabbinical culture, and the countries actually find value in it. It's not that they're fearful of the Brahmins, I better listen to them. It's actually value in their character, rabbinical characters, and their purport. and in their knowledge and their realization. So, I mean, sometimes, it sounds a little bit like the Church of England is, it's a few cardinals and king, but it's really this culture and it seems every level of anyways, that's my thought.
Yeah, Prabhupada even calls it a society of love and trust. And he describes how you see, Kali Yuga begins with the degrading of Brahmana culture. And as the culture of the Brahmanas is gone, then the Kshatriyas lose trust and faith in the Brahmanas. And then because the Kshatriyas have lost trust and faith in the Brahmanas, they don't have any advisory anymore. And they start administrating in more Kali Yuga ways. And then the Vaishyas lose hope in the kings and the rulers. And so they just start making profit and everything falls apart. But Prabhupada explains the society of love and trust is based on Brahmana culture because, like you said, it's not like a fear-based thing, but it's more like, they're happy that there's Brahmanas.
Towards the end of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes, he spoke of increasingly more of Anashram. In one place, I believe he's attributed to saying 50% of my mission remains incomplete because this needs to be instituted. And much of the time it was based on observation that people aren't necessarily going to become full Vaishnavas overnight. They almost need a safety net of gradual civilization, making gradual progress. It's worth looking in any society at the percentage of actual Brahmanas, those who are of the qualities, the guna, and perform the activities of the karma, will be small, maybe 1%. And just as you're describing, how many members of our society are really studying, worshipping the deity, and giving in charity. So it's a small number actually that really fulfill that social purpose. I'm less convinced, the Kshatriya is also a very, very small number, and I'm also not so convinced that our societal infrastructure has developed to the point where there's that many projects which you could consider like a kingdom or even a mayorship or a town or something. Yes, if a project has a whole bunch of land and there's maybe being engaged in different farmers and there's a cow protection project, you could say that the temple president in those instances is perhaps a little bit like a mayor, not simply a mahant. But I think that a mahant is not really a kshatriya. The temple president should be ruling over anybody, should simply be administrating. So that word is common, because Srila Prabhupada would sometimes use the term administration to describe the Kshatriyas. We mingle it in our minds. Someone with an administrative post in our society is a Kshatriya. Brave in battle, exacting taxes, instituting, law? Not really. Most of the time you would hope that they are receiving in charity, and yes, they should be hoarding, they should be dispersing as we heard, but Brahmana never keeps more than he needs for that day. Has faith in Krishna, so there should be a very liberal distribution of prasad and these kind of things. I think we need to be very thoughtful about how we conflate all of these different ideas in our minds. I think as we start to develop being more than simply a church or a confederation of temples, and actually start to think about these Varnashram projects where all the orders and stations of life are manifest and properly taken care of, then these things become more and more significant and prominent for us. But yeah, the challenges we have a dearth of people who are cultivating those higher natures. We have a lot of complainers, which apparently does correspond to one of the natures. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice.
Hare Krishna.
In one lecture, Srila Prabhupada, he says that if a devotee wishes to take one farm for their sense gratification, then that's the only benefit that they're getting. They're not getting any spiritual benefit.
Wow. I can't really see the clock from here. Sorry? 5:02. Okay, so there's 5 minutes more if there's... Sorry. Sorry, I can't hear you. I can't hear. Yeah. Well, they get all kinds of donations, and like Prabhu said, they would only keep as much as they need for the day because they have so much faith in Krishna that they're for sure, he's going to look after me tomorrow like he did today. So whatever extra they get, they would just give it away in charity. And that's another thing Mataji just said, the best kind of charity. They're giving away knowledge, they're teaching people how to worship the deity, and they're teaching people Shastra. And that's a wonderful type of charity. Jai. Okay. I guess that's it. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki. Samaveda Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki. Nitai Gaur Premanande.